Welcome to our panel on multilingual vocabularies, building collaborative knowledge networks. So our panel today will give an overview of 3 vocabulary projects and 1 project that's featuring a vocabulary implementation. So together we'll explore some of the ways these projects are leveraging partnerships with other terminology projects and with the broader community, using technologies such as linked open data, language tools, and AI, fostering respectful and open collaboration among institutions with communities, and exploring the use of vocabularies to make connections and improve access. So we only have 30 minutes, which is very short. There are actually 4 panelists today. Claudio wasn't able to join us in person, so we're going to play a video for his portion. Hopefully it works, because we just added it in last night. But I will just let each of our panelists introduce themselves before they speak. And we each have about 5 or 6 minutes to give an overview of the key objectives and strategies and challenges of our respective projects. We'll probably not have time for questions after, because we all want to get to the snacks and the drinks after, but I will invite you to approach any of us after the session during the snacks and drinks, or tomorrow or anytime, if you want to have some further discussion on any of these projects. So I'm Heather Dunn. I'm a Heritage Information Analyst with the Canadian Heritage Information Network, or CHIN. I'll be talking today about nomenclature for museum cataloging, which is a multilingual vocabulary project. And I'll be explaining a little bit about how its development is supported by partnerships and collaboration, how it's leveraging linked open data to improve access, and our continuous efforts to make it ever more unbiased and equitable and accessible. I'll also give a brief look at some of the challenges that we're facing. So for those that are not familiar with nomenclature, it's a multilingual vocabulary and classification system for object names. It's used by historic sites, museums, and local history societies that are cataloging historical and ethnological collections. It contains about 15,000 concepts arranged in a simple hierarchy that's grouped primarily by functional context. It's used across Canada and the US primarily, but also somewhat internationally. And it's been incorporated within many collections management systems, commercial collections management systems that are used by museums. It's been around since 1978, and it's been continuously developed and maintained through a partnership between the American Association for State and Local History, CHIN, and Parks Canada. So first, I wanted to talk a bit about collaborative work between vocabulary projects. In 2019, the Getty vocabulary program undertook a project to co-reference or match nomenclature and the AAT. And they're continuously we're working together to keep those matches updated. Wikidata volunteers are also continually working, primarily using the Wikidata mix and match tool to add co-references with nomenclature. So wherever nomenclature concepts match AAT or Wikidata concepts, links are being established both ways. We also have links to other vocabulary sources like Library of Congress subject headings and others, but these matches are kind of continuously being added and improved over time. So obviously this is helpful as a reference to catalogers using nomenclature as an easy way to access the same concept in other vocabularies, but also we can have mutual enrichment of the vocabularies, for example, as a result of the AAT nomenclature matching that I mentioned earlier. More than 15,000 terms, French terms from nomenclature were made available within the AAT, and nomenclature also displays about 5,700 Spanish terms from the AAT, citing the AAT as the source. And of course, we're open to collaborations with other vocabulary projects. I've been talking to a few people here that it seems promising that there's a lot of other work to be done. Secondly, I wanted to emphasize that nomenclature has been built and improved and expanded by inviting input from the museum community that it serves. It's developed and maintained by committees that are made up of volunteer members, Multiple subcommittees are assigned specific areas to focus on for terminology development. Subject experts in a particular type of object will sometimes be invited to contribute to the development of terminology in their field. And as I mentioned earlier, we have volunteers working on co-referencing and also on image submission. So anyway, a very important point here is that the terminology is continuously submitted by museums and individuals from across North America and beyond. And thirdly, I just wanted to mention that nomenclature is striving to be ever more diverse, multilingual, accessible, and inclusive. In addition to being fully bilingual English and French, it complies with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines so that it is as accessible as possible for people with disabilities. We're including Canadian English and Canadian French variants, and this can be either differences in spelling or terminology. I already mentioned the Spanish from the AT. We've also had interest from North American Indigenous communities to see terminology from their languages and concepts from their cultures represented within nomenclature. And we've begun work with the government of Nunavut to include terms in Inuktitut. I'm sure you can see this, it's probably very small, but we've got terms in Inuktitut with both the Latin script and the syllabics. And as more terminology from Indigenous languages is included in nomenclature, communities are able to search museum data sets for their objects in their own language. And lastly, just a few words about technical solutions to improve access. So in 2023, we launched a Sparkle endpoint, semantic resource view, full data set and per entity RDF downloads, and content negotiation, and an API is now available. So we've been in touch with most of the museum collections management software vendors who've been implementing most of them either with the API or the Sparkle endpoint. So these are technical solutions that support ease of access for museums by enabling the terminology to be integrated within museum software for lookup lists or data cleanup and reconciliation and for search assistance. We have had quite a few challenges with this project, including the complexities of working with diverse language communities, managing different contributor and user viewpoints and priorities, building trust and respect when working with underrepresented groups, changes to vocabulary over time, and building sustainable processes and systems for vocabulary maintenance and publication, and the evolving terminology needs of the museum community. So I don't have time to get into those challenges or solutions, but I would really be happy to have conversations with anyone that's interested in how we approach some of those challenges. So I will invite Jonathan up for the next part.
That's
hopefully
not how that should look. Oh, dear me. Strange. I'm going to wing it, all right? It's okay. So obviously our time individually on this panel is very brief, so I wanted to give a quick overview on where our efforts have been focused for improving the Getty vocabularies in 2024 from the broad to the narrow. We just wrapped up our International Terminology Working Group Conference, which gathers together several of our key stakeholders, current and future institutional contributors, museum and library professionals who use the vocabularies, international translators of the AAT, technologists, as well as a number of digital scholars. And this year, perhaps far more than other years, we had a lot to announce and discuss. The Getty vocabularies are collectively among the most popular tools that Getty provides. Our users range from catalogers to collection managers to digital humanists to AI bots that scrape our data all the time. I like to say that the vocabularies are forever growing, however, they are also forever incomplete and often imperfect, and therefore their current success, however measured, does not necessarily predict future successes. That said, we have a mandate, we have goals, we have a governance board with plans, and we are working hard at determining where our efforts are directed over the next several years. What are some of the primary issues we're working with? Let's start with editorial issues. Our goal always includes becoming more multilingual and with a concentration on reparative description, and that's across each vocabulary. But a small staff has to make judicious choices. What can make the most impact with our user communities? What are the most effective changes we can make? In the past year alone, we've added thousands of women artists to ULAN, for instance. We've made partnerships, such as the one with the National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage in South Korea for terminology contributions in Korean. We restored proper Native American reservation names to TGN, something that doesn't exist in correct forms in any geodatabase as of yet, as it demands research and consultation with tribal documentation, and would be essential for proper cataloging of Native American and First Nations cultural objects. And we're also reevaluating problematic terminologies in AAT. Witness at last year's CIDOC, keynote speaker Dominic Oldman quite rightly brought up the record for voodoo in our AAT as being out of date, inaccurate, and potentially offensive. In other words, at best, unhelpful for catalogers. Within a month, that was rectified, repaired, and split into multiple terms with complicated relationships and specific descriptive notes with associative relationships. This is the kind of work we are continually concentrating on. Yes, we might be a little bit late, we should be pushed in that direction, but we're pushing for the right terminologies and usage, and we have the ability to make these changes rather quickly. The kinds of changes that can express nuance in a vocabulary, which we have built into our data, the expression of pejorative terms or negative or terms to avoid, polyhierarchical placement to express multiple cultural points of view, noting historic terms, historic uses with time-space references, associative relationships for disambiguation or augmentation. But despite valiant efforts, one small team does not a Getty vocabulary make. We need to concentrate on creating more effective institutional partnerships to broaden the scope of our vocabularies. We can't do it alone. But those contributions should be geared specifically toward areas in which we are weak. We need a purposeful outward reach instead of being a solitary island. This may sound completely obvious, very sensible, but we've rarely had the ability to make it a focus. And that also means better interconnectivity between datasets outside the Getty. And for this, I'm speaking about connective tissue between our concepts and VOF, the World Historical Gazetteer, geonames, and Wikidata IDs for every vocab concept. Most often that's the other way around, but it should be from us out as well. Furthermore, we need to actively create relationships with vendors who use or apply Getty vocab data in their systems to perhaps actuate change for the better in how they're accessed. We need to know our users and how to help them. In this realm, we have lots to report in great thanks to our collaborative colleagues at Getty Digital, many of whom are here: Greg Garcia, David Newberry, Lily Prigil, Sela Constantine-Wall, Mark Pizik, and many others. Catalogers in research libraries are extremely important to us. It became clear that a viable MARC format release of our vocabs was needed to be applicable in the Ex Libris Alma software. A mapping was created, and AAT was just released and is now accessible for use within Alma, allowing users to choose any term they like, just how a thesaurus should work. A byproduct of this MARC work will be our vocabulary contributions back to VOF. VOF informed us that they will no longer convert our linked open data to MARC, and if we want to contribute to VOF, we must contribute back to them in MARC. So, now that AAT has been successfully mapped to MARC, ULAN and TGN will follow for access in systems like ALMA, but also for regular VOF updates and a more sensible MARC mapping than currently exists. On the other hand, we're also sunsetting some of our data releases. We cannot be everywhere for everyone, and we've announced over the next year or so that we'll be halting our relational tables downloads, our XML downloads, and our XML web services, all of which in part to guide people to our linked open data streams, and with any luck, full data sets mapped to the CRM by our friend George Brusiker at Takin Solutions, which will, we hope at some point, replace our earlier SCOS-based LOD. The start of this process has been announced on our website, and a roadmap will follow. This kind of commitment dovetails with Getty Digital's commitment to linked open data, and thankfully, their commitment to incorporating our vocabularies into the Getty's own data sets, such as the Getty Provenance Index and the museum collections, which can now be searched with full ULAN variant names. This is heartening, and just the kind of implementation I personally am excited about. It also gives us some push, and it can also point to specific rather than general ways for us to improve. And with all that said, there are things we still need to discuss as a department and as a community. How can we best help facilitate better contributions is a constant topic. And what about scope creep, to borrow a corporate cliche, remaining relevant? How much is too much? And can we say no to minimalist or duplicative contributions? Far larger a subject is the building of a new web-based vocabulary management system, a priority for some time. These and other philosophical discussions will be part of our roadmap over the next several years. Oop, I had a thank you slide, but we're just going to move on. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today I'd like to share some projects we are working on related to controlled vocabularies here in Mexico, especially at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, or UNAM. Our main project at the UNAM is the Art and Archaeology Thesaurus of Mexico. This thesaurus aims to organize and structure vocabularies for Mexican art and archaeology. But in addition, we are also developing another important project called Tomato or Tomate, which stands from the microthesaurus of work types, material and techniques focus on cultural collections at our university. As you can see in this slide, the workflow of this microthesaurus includes 5 stages. First, we extract and normalize terms from a large collection of sources. Then, specialists validate these terms to ensure accuracy. After that, we write definitions for each term. Then, each definition undergoes carefully review, and finally, we publish terms and definition in the microthesaurus. Now, I'd like to introduce some of the language technologies or IA tools we use in this workflow. The first tool we use is OCR combined with GPT Vision. OCR, or optical character recognition, allows us to extract text from images or scan documents. The GPT Vision, this one, processes visual information very accurately, with especially useful for historical or poorly scanned documents. As shown in this slide, traditional OCR might fail to recognize certain words like intelectuales in the example, in the yellow piece of paper, but the GPT Vision, this one, helps to transcribe it correctly, as you can see on the right side of the slide. Another tool we use is OpenRefine. This software helps enhance database information by clustering and refining lexical data from museum databases. It also allows us to match or recognize our databases information with various lexical resources on the internet, like Wikidata in Spanish or the Getty Thesaurus. Additionally, we use hybrid system to extract terms from document collections. For instance, we use the ICOM corpus analysis tool kit to identify terms through mathematical analysis. We also use Termxt, a tool that combines linguistic and mathematical methods to term extraction. I like to say that Termxt is this one. Termxt is a Mexican software development. Finally, we include a traditional ethnographic approach to refine the automatic term extraction results. For the text analysis, we use 2 free software tools. The first is Gecko, which is helpful to concordances and keyword in context analysis. And the second is AntConc, which helps us to find definition patterns and context for each term. To write definition, we use Gratilo GPT. We provide Gratilo with context of each term and information, and it generates different types of definition. For example, an Aristotelian definition, an extensional definition, and a functional definition. We then merge these three different definitions into a single complex definition, which a group of art specialists and archaeologists reviews and refines as needed. Once everything is already done, we publish the terms and definitions in the Microthesaurus, which is hosted in the website of the Institute of Aesthetic Research at Mexico. We use the Tema 3 software to make it accessible, as shown here in the screenshot of this is the prototype. As you can see, the Microthesaurus workflow with this language technology now looks like this. And to conclude, I hope this overview of our workflow and tools provide insight into how we are building structured vocabularies for Mexican art and archaeology. I am convinced that this work will support our integration into the future knowledge network. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. A little warning in advance. I tend to be kind of loud when I give a presentation, and then I don't mean linked open usable data. So please, if I am too loud, warn me. I'm Shannon. My background is in art history, so I'm not a technician. And I work for the Rijksmuseum for 1 month now. But before that, I've worked at the Rijksmuseum, which is a museum of a much smaller scale, more up north in the Netherlands. And when I was working there, I'm going to talk about our project later, but we devised this idea of how can we use preferred broader terms managed in Pool Party and linked to URIs from collection management systems of different museums, there's various museums in our network, and this can be used as a facet search on our front end. So not a very sexy title, very long, but this is my idea, which is either, I think, a really good idea or a really bad idea. So I'm really curious about your viewpoints on this. What was the project? The Rijksmuseum is part of a network of a lot of organizations, and it's mostly cultural history museums. So in the Netherlands, there used to be an inland sea, which is called the Zuiderzee, which is not there anymore because they closed it off with a dike, because Dutch people like to build dikes, so they did that. And so the culture that was there surrounding the villages surrounding the sea kind of disappeared over time. So there were various museums who like to keep this culture. And you should think of objects like painted furniture with certain painting styles and regional dress and crafts and those kinds of things. So back in 2016, we decided we could create a network of these museums, and we used the National Strategy for Digital Heritage, which Enno talked about this morning, as our framework. They have also reference architecture that we used because we wanted to create a front end which used, of course, linked data. So this was about 8 years ago, and we did have a little bit of knowledge about linked data, and so we thought, okay, let's do this. And of course, we gathered all the museums, and we came together and we said, how about you all buy into this triple stores, and you'll get Sparkle endpoints, and then we can build a website. So all the museums, which are like the scale of maybe 10 volunteers or such, of course, they said, oh yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to buy into a triple store and then have a Sparkle endpoint, and then we're done. So, well, of course, this didn't happen like that, because that is not how the world works. I think some of you work in institutions that are probably a little bit bigger than just volunteers, but maybe also have like small budgets. So if you want to use linked data, but you don't have a lot of money, and you don't have a lot of like internal knowledge about what is linked data and how you're going to use that, how you're going to proceed. So this was a big challenge for us, because what we did do was gather the museums and talk about linked data. And you could see like the look in their eyes like fade away, like, oh, okay. I know this sounds like a good idea, but I just love my regional dress in my museum, and I don't want to talk about this data stuff. And so what could we do? So basically the first step we did was a very easy step. It was, of course, looking at all the concepts, people, places that were in the data of these museums and link them to controlled vocabularies, of course. So just adding URIs to their concepts in their collection management systems. So we really purposefully wanted to do it at the source and teach like these colleagues at these various museums about what is linked data and how does it work, to get this data awareness. We didn't just want to like go there, add URIs to their collection management system and leave and be happy because we get the data we want and we get to build this nice linked data front end. No, we wanted to teach them, how does it work? You know, what does this mean to do this? And it worked really well. It took a long time, of course, because you have to talk a lot, you have to go to the museums a lot, you have to like convince people to do this. So I often felt like this missionary who goes on to museums and says, oh, URIs are the best thing in the world, and persistent identifiers and APIs. But eventually, we did get a lot of museums to adopt this vision and include URIs in their system. So we had a start there. We could build something from this. And but we did have like a problem. So we could build a website and we could present these and we could use the controlled vocabularies to resolve external information, which was nice. But we wanted to present the website, we wanted to make it user-friendly. So you need like search facets, of course. So you can define your search. You can, of course, have a search bar and you can enter anything you like. But we've seen in presentations before, just having a search bar isn't always helpful for your museum visitors, of your website visitors. So we needed to have these facets, and we like to have category facets. But all these museums, and I'm talking about 20 museums, they had their own category system. And some had like 10 categories, and then you should think of like chair belongs to furniture, so the category would be furniture and paintings and textile and stuff. But some had like 200 categories. And just the URIs weren't going to help us here, because we could present all these categories and there would be like 200 facets and wouldn't help us at all. So when last year we were thinking about creating this new front end to the CIDOC collection platform, where all these collections are presented, and we were thinking, well, how are we going to do this? So how are we going to create facets that would be user-friendly instead of too much? And we devised this idea of having preferred broad terms, which I called bros in this slide, but it's probably a better term for this. And we would manage this in Pool Party. So Pool Party is, of course, a nice thing you can do in summer, but I think some of you also know like the software tool Pool Party. Anyone familiar with it? All right, yes, see some hands. So you can manage a thesaurus in Pool Party. And for the URIs we used were by the Cultural Heritage Agency in the Netherlands. And they managed their thesaurus in Pool Party. So we could create like a mirror image of this thesaurus. So we don't have to manage a thesaurus our own. We could still use the controlled vocabulary managed by the Cultural Heritage Agency. The only thing we did was devise preferred broader terms, which we thought were very useful for the purpose of our website. So for instance, crafts, like a basket weaver, we would give it a preferred broader term, which is crafts. But basket weaver would also have the original broader term of occupation, of course. So it would still have this broader term, which would be derived from the original controlled vocabulary, but it would also have our broader term, which we managed in Pool Party. And because there was a lot of overlap in URIs by the different museums, we only have to implement this. Well, you have to keep it up, of course, but the implementing wasn't very hard. So what would be possible on the website? You would just have these search facets, which would be, well, more than 3, but at least not 200. So for users, we thought this was a very, much more user-friendly way to search through all these museum collections. And, well, this kind of concludes my presentation. And I'm really curious to hear from you if this is a good idea or just not such a good idea. So, thank you.
So, thank you very much for attending our presentation. I will let you go for snacks and drinks now, but we will all stay here for a few minutes if you want to come up and ask questions. And there are some colleagues of Claudio here as well, which I'm sure if you have questions, they can maybe answer or maybe pass on the questions. So, thank you.